Great, guys, welcome back. In the previous lesson, we learned how to decode a functional writing question using four things. Remember, audience, purpose, format, and keys instructions, right? Or simply APFK. But understanding the question is only half the battle, right? Now comes the bigger challenge. How do you turn those instructions into an answer that actually earns high marks, right? Because simply mentioning every bullet point is not enough, right? And so in this lesson, I'll show you how to develop your ideas, organize your writing, control your tone, improve your language, and check your work before you submit it. All right, so let's begin with our biggest differences between an average answer and a strong answer. Okay. Suppose the question asks, explain why students enjoyed the sports day. Yeah. One student writes, right? Students enjoyed the sports day because it was fun. Is that wrong? No. But is it strong? Not really, right? The student has answered the question, but only at a very basic level. So now listen to this version, okay? Students particularly enjoyed the inter-house competition because everyone had an opportunity to participate rather than simply watch. The friendly rivalry also created an energetic atmosphere and encouraged students to support their classmates. Now, that answer does much more, right? It develops the idea. So, again, here is a simple method you can use: point, explain, effect, or example, PEE. All right, let's try it, right? Point. The new computer room was useful, right? And now explain it. The new computer room allowed students to research information more quickly, all right? Now add the effect, okay? As a result, students were able to complete group projects more efficiently. That is development. So whenever you make an important point, ask yourself questions. Why, how, and what happened because of this? Those questions will help you produce stronger content. All right, now let's talk about bullet points, right? Imagine the question says, write a report. Imagine the question says, write a report about a school trip. Include what students enjoyed, problems during the trip, and suggestions for future trips. Think of those three bullet points as three boxes, okay? So before you finish your answer, all three boxes must be checked. A very common mistake is spending too much time on the first point because you have many ideas, right? Then you look at the clock and realize you have only a few minutes left. So the second and third points become rushed. Your answer becomes unbalanced, right? So try to divide your time and your word count sensibly. Give each major part of the task enough attention. Next comes organization. Every paragraph should have a job. Do not throw all your ideas into one giant block of writing. Okay. For example, in a report, your paragraph might explain the purpose of the report, right? That's your first paragraph. The second paragraph might discuss what went well, right? The third might explain the problems. And the fourth might give recommendations, right? So simple organization like this makes your writing easier to follow. And when your writing is easier to follow, your ideas become more convincing, right? So your paragraphs should also move forward. Listen to this. The library was crowded. There were many students. A lot of people were inside. The library had too many students, right? What happened there? The writer repeated the same idea four times. Now listen to this version, right? The library was extremely crowded during lunch breaks, leaving many students without a suitable place to work. Additional seating or booking system for study tables could have reduced this problem. Right? Better, right? So that is the kind of progression you want. All right, now let's talk about register. Remember in the last lecture, we also talked about register, right? Register means the level and type of language you use. Your language must match your audience. Suppose you're writing to the principal. This sounds appropriate. I would recommend increasing the number of supervised study areas available after school. Now compare that with, you guys seriously need to sort this out. Right? Clearly, the second version is not appropriate for a principal. But here's an important point. Good writing is not always formal writing, right? Good writing is appropriate writing. So if you're writing to a close friend, extremely formal language that sounds unnatural. So always ask, who am I writing to? And would I realistically speak to this person in this way? And be careful not to change register halfway through. For example, don't start with like, "Dear sir, I am writing to express my concern regarding the recent changes to the school timetable." Excellent. But then 3 paragraphs later, you write, "Anyway, the whole thing is pretty annoying." Now your tone has collapsed. Your writing should be consistent from beginning to end, right? Now let's look at vocabulary, right? There is a misconception, right? Some students believe high level vocabulary means using extremely difficult words. It does not. It does not. A strong vocabulary means choosing the most precise word. For example, the rain was very heavy, right? The sentence is fine, but you could write the rain hammered against the window, right? And now that's more vivid. You can actually visualize it, right? Instead of saying he walked quickly into the hall, if you were to write he rushed into the hall, right? Or instead of saying the committee looked carefully at the proposal, you could write the committee examined the proposal, right? So a strong verb can often replace several weaker words. Remember that. A strong verb can often replace several weaker words. But do not use complicated vocabulary that you cannot control, right? Imagine writing this. The cafeteria situation created a catastrophic humanitarian predicament. What actually happened? The cafeteria ran out of sandwiches, right? Now that's too much, right? It's not a humanitarian crisis. You do not need dramatic vocabulary just to sound intelligent. Sophisticated writing means precision and control, not exaggeration. And sentence variety also matters. Listen to this. The event started at 9, students arrived, teachers arrived, the competition started, everyone was excited. Grammatically is acceptable, right? But it sounds robotic. Now listen to this. By 9 o'clock, students and teachers had filled the field. As the first competition began, the atmosphere quickly became energetic. Same basic information, but the second version flows much better. Try to use a mixture of short sentences and longer sentences, right? Short sentence can also create emphasis. For example, we cannot ignore this problem. It's simple, direct, effective. All right, now let's move to grammar. First, tenses, right? Suppose you're describing an event that already happened. You might write, the students arrived at 9 o'clock. That is past tense. But if one event happened before another, you may need the past perfect. For example, by the time teachers arrived, the students had already entered the hall. The words that already, entered show that this happened first. The important thing is consistency. So do not jump randomly between past and present. All right. Now, look at subject-verb agreement. Look at this sentence. The list of recommendations are attached. What is the main subject? The list, not recommendations, right? So the correct answer is the list of recommendation is attached. Another example. The group of students was waiting outside. The main subject is group. Always find the real subject before choosing the verbs, right? Now, punctuation. You do not need to use complicated punctuation in every sentence, but you do need control over full stops, commas, apostrophes, quotation marks, and sentence boundaries. So be especially careful with very long sentences. If you have written 4 lines and still have not reached that full stop, ask yourself, do I need to end the sentence? Sometimes the best punctuation correction is simply a full stop. You may also have heard this rule, right? Never begin a sentence with and, but, or so. That is not an absolute rule of English, okay? Writers can begin sentences with conjunctions. But in formal functional writing, repeatedly beginning sentences with and, but, or so can make your writing sound too conversational. The better rule is use them deliberately. Do not use them automatically. And what about contractions? Words like don't, can't, won't, right? These are perfectly normal in English, right? They may work well in an informal letter, a speech or dialogue. But in a formal report or formal letter, you may prefer do not, cannot, will not. Again, the key idea is register. Use language that fits the situation. Now let's talk about word limits. Some students think if 300 words are good, 500 would be, it must be even better. No, the examiner is not paying you by the word, all right? Writing too much can create several problems. You waste time, you repeat yourself, and every sentence gives you another chance to make a spelling, grammar, or punctuation mistakes, right? So to follow the word range, give it in your examination. Your goal is not to write the most. Your goal is to write the most effectively. Now we come to one of the easiest ways to save marks, right? Checking your work. Do not finish your answer and immediately stop. Leave time to check, but do not reread the whole answer casually, right? Use a system. First, check content. Did I cover every bullet point? Actually look back at the questions, right? And do not trust your memory, okay? Second, check audience and register. Does my language sound appropriate for the person I'm writing to? Third, check tenses. Are my verbs consistent? Did I accidentally write something like, yesterday we go to the museum? If so, fix it. Fourth, check subject-verb agreement. Look carefully at the sentences containing phrases like the group of, the number of, the list of, right? Make sure the verb agrees with the true subject. Fifth, check punctuation. Look for missing full stop, missing commas, apostrophe errors, and dialogue punctuation if you use dialogue, right? Finally, check for missing words. This is important. Your brain knows what you intended to write, and it happens to me a lot, right? So if you accidentally write, the student's very excited about the competition, you brain may suddenly insert the missing word were, right? The students were very excited about the competition. Read carefully enough to see what is actually on the page. Now, let's put everything together before writing. Remember, audience, purpose, format, key instruction, or in the previous lecture we talked about APFK, right? While writing, cover every point, develop your ideas, organize clearly, maintain the correct structure, correct register, right? Use precise language, and after writing, check your work. Functional writing is not about showing the examiner a very difficult word, you know. It is about control. Can you control your content? Can you control your tone? Can you control your structure? Can you control your grammar? And can you do all of that while following the task exactly, right? If the answer is yes, you're not simply writing an answer. You're writing an excellent answer. And you're writing for marks. I'll see you in the next lecture.